Let's take a dive into what would happen if the British were soundly beaten in the 1857 Indian Mutiny. Also called the First Indian War of Independence, the conflict had a lasting impact on how European colonial powers managed their possessions and saw the replacement of rule by the British East India Company by the British Crown. In this video, we will look at the conditions that would be required and what rebels could have done to bring about their victory. Welcome to our channel, where we focus on topics in history and alternative history. The rebellion starts off in much the same way. Disenfranchised soldiers are frustrated by the lack of respect from their superiors and British officers. Anger boils over, and several soldiers lead a rebellion against the British East India Company. Initially, there were calls for the Mughal emperor, now just a figurehead, to feature as the head of the rebellion. However, many communities throughout India were apprehensive, given the often brutal repression they faced under the Mughals, particularly those in most recent memory. In addition, the British had a divide and conquer policy. This meant that some communities were deliberately treated better than others. This was through the appointment of members of their communities to key positions or other preferential treatment. Therefore, the mutineers instead agreed to organize themselves along linguistic and regional lines, rather than religion. This has the effect of allowing for better tactical responses to local developments. These groups are also in agreement to go their own separate ways once the conflict concludes, thereby seeking an easier path to their eventual independence. Some communities are more apprehensive to join the rebellion at first, most notably the Punjabis and the Pathans. However, with multiple battlefield successes in the east and south, together with a strong lobbying campaign, soon the rebellion spreads to the northwest as well. Specifically, appeals were made to the strong regional identities of Punjabis and Pathans, and indeed all regions. Upon seeing the success of the rebels, Britain's adversaries take advantage of the situation and pledge support to the rebels. The Russian Empire and the Qajar dynasty in Iran provide arms to the Punjabis and Pathans. China sends supplies to the Bengalis over their border, and the French, Portuguese, and Dutch provide assistance to the rebels in the south with their strong navies. Assistance varies between the regions and the ease with which it can be supplied. However, it usually involves providing military advisors as well as arms and ammunition. Eventually, the rebels begin manufacturing their own arms. The Americans provide diplomatic and financial support. By focusing on the support of the massive rural population through local and religious leaders, the rebels are able to rely on a supply of labor that the British cannot hope to match. The rebels also reach out to communities which have allied themselves with the British. For example, the small but growing Christian communities promise peace and protection if they switch allegiance. The rebels even find success in convincing lower-ranking British officers to share intelligence through bribery and the promise of prominent positions after the rebels have secured victory. Soon, the British are reduced to a fraction of their original territory. The toll has been high, with many civilians on both sides caught up in the fighting. Examples of atrocities committed by combatants are numerous and lead to lasting resentment. But there are examples of heroic and chivalrous conduct. Stories spread far and wide of this bravery of the Sikhs, who free women and children from slave traders and bandits from Afghanistan who tried to take advantage of the chaos. In addition, local militias of Hindus and Muslims in South and Eastern India are applauded for guarding each other's religious sites when armies pass through. Unable to hold the rebels at bay, the British sue for peace. This sees their holdings in the subcontinent reduced to Bombay, Yangon, and Ceylon, and they are forced to remove missionaries and garrisons throughout the continent. They now have the same position as other colonial powers in India. The map of India is now fractured, with several megastates and dozens of smaller territories. Conflicts often arise, but eventually a status quo is established. Most interestingly, religion is not the only determinant behind territory. Instead, groupings according to culture and language take place, in line with India's history before the British arrived. By the time the conflict is ended, the Qajar dynasty moves into Balochistan and parts of Afghanistan, where it establishes client states under its control. Bengal becomes the most powerful state in the east, with a large population, abundant agricultural capabilities, and a close proximity to China for trade. In Punjab, a delicate peace takes hold. However, the Sikh, Muslim, and Hindu communities develop a lasting power sharing arrangement that allows for each community to take care of its own civil matters whilst remaining as a united political, economic, and military entity. It becomes the strongest state in the West and takes control of Rajasthan, but maintains strong relationships with regions to the south in order to have access to the sea for trade. In the south, Tamil Nadu becomes the most powerful entity, having a strong regional linguistic identity. It is also geographically well situated, having access to trade routes between the east and west. Being a region with high literacy, it quickly becomes the wealthiest power. Greatly weakened, the supremacy of the British over its rivals globally is diminished. This new multipolar world sees an increase in minor conflicts between the great powers of the time. Africa is spared the industrial scale colonization of our timeline. Instead, local proxies are used to vie for influence and power. Over time, close trading relationships develop between the different states in India. Where threats do arise, military assistance is provided to one another. These close relationships eventually lead to the forming of a powerful economic union with similar borders to what we see today. That concludes today's scenario. If you're interested in other alternative history scenarios, please feel free to watch our other videos. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more content. See you in the next one.